Hello y'all, welcome back to another video dedicated to help you break out of the cycle of toxic behaviors and relationships in your personal and romantic area of your life. Now my name is Coach Jeanette from @Jeanette.Exito, and if you like anything personal development or healthy relationships, make sure you hit subscribe to join the tribe. Now in today's video, we are going to be doing something super exciting, and I've been waiting to film this video because not only have all of y'all requested it highly from my Instagram and TikTok, but I'm going to be doing something that I really enjoy, which is relationship video analysis breakdowns. I've done a couple of them already on my Instagram. Each time I've done it, they've gone insanely viral. You guys love the breakdowns. You guys love understanding why the things are happening, why people are behaving the way that they are, so that you can help your own personal relationships, which I love. But there's always so much more that I would love to say, but there's only so much text that I can fit in an Instagram reel, which is why I decided to do a poll, and a lot of y'all request that you guys want to see an in-depth analysis. So here I am today. We are going to be reacting to another clip from the show Couples Therapy by Dr. Orna. I've seen a little snippet of a show so far. It's about expectations and how it fails relationships, but I haven't watched the whole thing, so you're going to be seeing my reaction and analysis breakdowns in real time. And if you liked any of the analysis breakdowns, or in any time you feel like it resonated with you, make sure you comment that down below, and then I can expand on the topic to help you understand it a little bit more. But with that said, let's get straight into the video.
I guess I expect more than I'm getting.
Expect. You're using a very particular word. You're not saying I long for. You're saying I expect, which means that sets up Rod to fail.
Okay.
You expect, and then the person fails you. So that.
Okay. I don't want to pause the video so much, but there is something that she said there that I want to elaborate on a little bit more, because I feel like this is a very common behavior, and I've seen it time and time again with my clients, where we set expectations for our partner instead of standards. And the thing about expectations and how it could be so sneaky is that it makes it about them. It's rooted in external validation, where you're telling your partner, if you don't do this, then I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be disappointed. And then we start to change the way that we see our worth, and how, because they're not showing up and doing the things that we wanted them to, that must mean that we're not good enough, that we're unworthy. And because this dynamic is so sneaky, and it might seem like we're setting boundaries or we're being healthy, it really does set our partner up for self-sabotage and failure, because we will never be satisfied. When we are placing our expectations, we are viewing our partner as their potential, as this fantasy version of, I see them as this type of person, and I hope that they'll show up this way. But it's not grounded in reality, because that is not who our partner is. They are not perfect. They cannot be superhuman, and they are bound to make mistakes just as we are. And so when we put this expectation onto them, reality will hit, and then we'll become disappointed, and this perpetual cycle of not feeling like enough, or there's something missing and wanting to change our partner, will continue. Okay, let's continue watching the video.
That's already a dynamic that is toxic for the two of you.
Because then I get a response.
But what does he expect? If you were expecting, what does he expect?
I don't know what I want.
That's important.
I'm not sure
But
what I
you know
want.
you're disappointed.
Because, right.
And none of you even know what's missing.
Not.
Okay. I don't want to keep pausing the video. Oh my gosh. Okay. I think this is so important. I love how the therapist emphasizes, what do you expect? Because you hear her response, and she says, I don't know. And I think a lot of times when we have these expectations, a lot of my clients say the same thing. It's like, I don't know what I'm expecting. I just know that I'm disappointed. I know that I feel upset. And that is the issue, right? It's not knowing. Because when we don't know what we want, what our needs are, what our values are, what's important to us, we are the blind leading the blind, right? We're telling our partner we want them to do this, but we don't know why. And it's so hard to set clear boundaries and communicate when we don't know what we value, because then our actions are not rooted in our values and our beliefs and what we truly align with. Our actions start to be rooted in the things that we are just feeling. And feelings are temporary. They're not something that we can build a concrete foundation on. And so knowing what you want, knowing what your values are, who you are as a person, and how you can show up in the relationship will really change the way that you start communicating clearly in your relationships. Okay, let's continue.
You don't know what you want, you don't know what is expected, both of you just know it fails.
Correct.
Meaning there's nothing there, really. This is like some cover-up for something else.
Yes.
Okay. But the reason I sometimes choose to avoid these conversations is maybe because they're difficult. And dare I say anything about finances, and that's it. That's, you know,
But
that's
it's not.
Hold on.
Okay. Sorry.
There's a lot of pressure.
You can see one of the partner admits that he's a bit more avoidant, and it's because these conversations are difficult. And you'll see this pattern a lot in dismissive avoidance, where they tend to avoid out of the fear of shame or the fear of problems or conflict, because they didn't grow up learning that conflict is a healthy thing that they can deal with. They learned that conflict leads to breakups. They learn that conflict leads to them feeling like a bad person, like they're responsible for it. And so they tend to avoid so that they don't have to deal with those emotions and feel them. But if you notice really quickly how his partner reacts when he mentions finances, she immediately butts in. And that can also feel very hopeless for a dismissive avoidant as well, because he could start to feel like he's not getting truly heard and listened to. The things that he's saying, his partner is not listening to validate and actually hear him, but she's listening to respond and rebuttal. Okay, let's continue.
From me, if you wanted me, I wanted myself. It's not bad to kind of, you know, be more successful for a second. But when you deliver it with that, you know, jab, it feels, ugh.
It feels what?
It feels,
What? What does it feel?
it feels like
It
a
feels
jab.
like- Okay,
look,
but
right now,
but doesn't but I'm asking you
But the
nicely.
anger's manifesting right now. We knew you get
It's
it.
not. I'm not.
So you see that dynamic, right? And in this video, this analysis that I'm doing, it's not to blame either or partner, but it's to really understand what's going on underneath. And so you can see what's happening here is that as he's continued to speak, she is becoming more and more reactive, right? He mentions that the anger is manifesting, and a lot of this reaction and this rebuttal that occurs during communication is what causes the dismissive avoidant to feel safe, to feel like whatever they say, it's not going to be heard, to think, what's the point? If I say something, they're not going to want to listen to anyways, so I'm going to want to retreat. Now, it's not to say that her point is invalid too, that she wants to have a bigger understanding of what's going on underneath, which is why she's asking these questions and to inquire. But it's the tone of voice, it's the body language, it's the way that we show up with this nonverbal communication is what creates a safe dynamic as well. And I think a lot of us, we put a lot of emphasis on what we say, but we don't put enough emphasis on how we say it, which is just as important. I will argue that a majority of communication is actually nonverbal. It's the way that we show up with our body language, with our tone of voice, with our behaviors. And that is what creates this safe environment. And another thing I want to mention here really quick too is, you know, as he's speaking and as he's trying to figure out what emotion he's feeling and trying to articulate his words, which can be difficult actually for a dismissive avoidant. A lot of dismissive avoidants are so used to pushing their emotions away and not feeling them that when it comes time to actually talking about their emotions, they're not sure. They just know they feel uncomfortable, but they don't know what it is because they've never taken the time to feel their emotion. And so now that he's doing the work to try to feel his emotions, I can see why he'd want to retreat from these types of conversations, because it almost seems like him processing is an issue for her. But let's watch a little bit more to understand what's going on underneath and why she's becoming so reactive.
But I'm really not.
Okay.
Well, you sound angry.
Okay.
You sound frustrated.
Because I feel it. Okay. Because
You do not sound like you want to hear what it feels like.
I do want to hear it.
So
So
do
just
something with
okay.
your demeanor that invites that.
You just witnessed it. She triggers so quickly. And it's like, whoa, it's not, again,
Well,
it's just,
did you see what I did?
yeah, you did, absolutely.
You can do that.
we need to tackle our
I like that. I like how the therapist redirected that conversation and really showed him what it looks like to gently call someone out and make sure that they're not marinating in their emotions, because it's so easy to start spiraling once they feel something, right? But a lot of what he's saying, it's not necessarily personal. It's just him trying to process his emotions, but she's wanting to understand and get the answer right away. And I see that a lot with my anxious and fearful avoidance. When there's a lot of uncertainty, it makes them feel unsafe and uncomfortable, which is why in dynamics, when the dismissive avoidant is not really saying anything, it causes the anxious or fearful avoidant to want to understand more. They start displaying their activating strategies, which include texting often, trying to fix the problem right away, get their partner to talk, tell them that it's important, and really understand what's going on. Because that certainty and that connection that they're craving is what makes them feel safe. Whereas the dismissive avoidant, it tends to be the opposite. Space makes them feel safe because they don't have to be responsible for other people's emotions. All right, let's continue.
issues.
What does that mean?
We need to talk about our finances. We need to get help and figure out what we need to do together.
Do you want to try talking about finances?
Sure.
Go ahead.
We know the answer. We
Okay.
need to make more income. That's the answer. We can't cut back on anything because there's not nothing to cut back on. We need to bring in more. There are things you spend on, I don't, and it's another X amount here, another X amount there. And we don't have conversations about that. All of a sudden I see, wow, $700 out in the bank. Where'd that go?
What are you talking about?
You went to get your eyes tested last couple weeks ago and you spent $700.
But you know, it's once a year that I go and I get my eyes checked. I'm not going to justify that. I'm not. And this is where I get angry. Because this is where, like, that's the conversation we're having.
It just came up. I wasn't conscious. I wasn't.
What conversation?
Okay, so you can see the dynamic and the communication dynamic going on here. It's very defensive. It's very keeping score, right? You did this, I did this, and it's not focusing on what the other person needs. And I see this a lot in so many couples, which is why they start to spiral and not be able to resolve their conflicts. It's because they're so focused on fixing the problem and thinking logically. You can actually see clearly that the woman here is feeling very reactive, which means that she emotionally does not feel safe. And I know a lot of dismissive avoidance, they tend to want to rationalize things and think logically because they think that that is going to resolve the conflict. When in reality, it's two different languages that they're speaking. One is speaking with emotions and the other is speaking with logic. And so actually a better resolution here would be to understand how she's feeling, to reassure her emotionally and let her know, let's talk about finances. This is important to me. This is important to us. And I would like to understand how you're feeling about this. Some sort of validation, some sort of working as a team would be super helpful instead of telling the other person specific details about why their finances might not be working. Because now she's taking this as an attack and he's focusing on one specific detail that seems like only happens once a year. Right? And she's dismissing that really quickly. As I'm rewatching and editing this video, I wanted to add in something that I missed, which is the reason why she is so reactive is because he started to nitpick and keep score of what she was doing. And he does mention that it was unconscious and it was not something that he was immediately thinking. But that is what happens in a relationship when arguments turn into you did this, I did this, you did this, you did this. What happens is that the other partner becomes defensive because they're so focused on defending themselves and proving you wrong with that specific detail that you mentioned. And the root of the issue and the argument gets lost. It no longer becomes about finances, which is what they originally want to talk about. And it's a very you versus me mentality. And this isolates each other in this relationship, and it's no longer a partnership, right? It's almost like two people debating against each other when it should be us against the problem. Let's see what the therapist has to say about their communication dynamic.
Want to be having.
You wanted to talk about money, and there's conversation about money. It is.
So why didn't you talk to me about it then? Why did you have to wait? Like, if there's something bothering you.
So, if you want Rod to talk to you more, you have to make the conversations inviting.
Okay.
The therapist couldn't have said it better. Her reactivity to him saying things, and like I mentioned in the beginning, it's her with the constant rebuttals, right? Her reactivity to what he's saying isn't inviting. She says, I think she says before, if you want to talk about, what did she say?
So why didn't you talk to me about it then? Why did you have to wait? Like,
Okay. Why didn't you talk to me about it then? Why did you have to wait? If there's something bothering you.
there's something bothering you.
So,
And then, right. And I'm assuming she was going to say, if there's something bothering you, you should say something about it, right? And I've heard this narrative all the time, especially from anxious and fearful avoidant attachment styles, because dismissive avoidants tend to not want to communicate things right away. Because they haven't processed it yet. In all honesty, a lot of dismissive avoidants, they do not know they're upset until a couple days later, especially if they're so used to pushing out their emotions, compartmentalizing, and numbing them. But for an anxious and fearful avoidant, they feel emotions very deeply, especially for anxious. And so what ends up happening is that because they feel emotion so deeply, they want to fix it right away, like I mentioned before. And so she doesn't understand, and she can't fathom why he wouldn't say anything right then in that moment, when it's the difference between perspectives. It's the difference between, as human, we are nuanced and we process things differently. And sometimes we may have a certain perspective, but our partner does not. The way that we grew up, the things that we see and hear as we grow up affects how we process things deeply. And you can hear it in the word choices that she uses. If you wanted to blah, 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 then you should have blah, 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 blah. And this if and should statement puts a lot of guilt, it puts a lot of blame onto the other partner. And you can see that she is trying to shame him for not speaking up earlier, which also then focuses on the wrong point of the argument. She starts to hyper-focus on another behavior to make him feel wrong or bad, and it completely distracts them from actually talking and discussing the topic of finances. It is not wrong for her to request that she would want him to speak up more often, right? If there's a pattern of him not initiating conversations or speaking up when he's upset, this is something that we want to address, but we don't want to hyper focus on these types of behaviors when we are trying to focus on one topic at a time. Okay, let's continue.
if you want Rod to talk to you more, you have to make the conversations inviting.
Okay.
If you're going to keep being angry, you're not going to have that thing you want.
All right. Okay. So that was the end of this clip here. I did a little bit of a longer analysis than I thought I would, but I think there's a couple of behaviors that we didn't address yet. The good thing that I'm seeing here in this couple dynamic actually is that she's really receptive. She is listening to Dr. Orna and she's saying, okay, Yes. And she's hearing her, and she's trying to actually take her feedback and internalize it. And I think she definitely deserves commendation because of that. It's hard to hear when you're doing something wrong or when your behavior is unhealthy. Most of the time, people react to that with defensiveness because they don't want to be told that they're wrong. They feel a lot of shame. They feel like they're not being heard. But the fact that she's so receptive shows me that this couple has hope. As long as they're both willing to work through the dynamic and change the behavior together, I think it can definitely be possible to create more healthier dynamics in communication. Now, what I'm seeing here is a very typical anxious and dismissive avoidant dynamic, where the guy here is a bit more avoidant. He is sharing his truth, but he's not sure how to articulate how he feels clearly. He's trying to still process that. And it seems like she is the one constantly initiating these conversations. But because she feels her emotions so deeply, she projects them into the relationship and she wants to fix them. But it's disguised as talking about the topic, which is finances. So they're not discussing how she's really feeling and how she's feeling so reactive and unseen and unheard. And I think this is where the anger manifests. Usually when someone's this angry in a relationship is because there was a constant pattern of being unseen, unheard, or the same thing happening over and over again. And when that pattern happens, it can be so hard to process our emotions and not become reactive. But Dr. Orn is correct. In order to have healthy communication where one person is not becoming reactive and the other person is not becoming defensive, we must meet each other where we can meet them, which means that we learn to process our emotions, right? We learn to take a deep breath when we notice ourselves being reactive, reminding ourselves, what am I making this other person's actions mean about me? Am I saying that they're reacting this way because I'm not enough? They're reacting this way because they must think I'm dumb, right? What are the stories that we're telling ourselves in this situation that is causing us to be so reactive? And then how can we neutralize that thought? Because a lot of times we run with it and we believe it when it might not necessarily be true, right? Our partners might be reacting this specific way because number one, they're not comfortable speaking up about emotions. Number two, they have wounds and negative narratives about these types of topics. And we might not ever know unless we start doing the inner work and start really allowing ourselves to neutralize and understand why we are reacting and feeling so triggered all the time. Like, what are we taking personally? And how is this costing peace in my relationship? With that said, let me know if you have any analysis or thoughts or other movies that you'd like me to react to. Comment that down below. I would love to connect with y'all. And if you liked my analysis and you'd like to work one-on-one with me, you can book a call, link in the description below. But follow for more, and I'll see you in the next video. As always, you got this.